Let's face it, the media, your liberal friends on Facebook, and those rioting in the streets want you to stay home on Election Day. They think your voice and even your thoughts are politically incorrect and unacceptable. Prove them wrong and go to 10for20.com now and commit to voting this November 3rd.
Joining us now, Stephen K. Bannon, former senior advisor to the president, and he's now host of the amazingly popular show War Room Pandemic. War Room 2020 airs 10 to noon here on the John Fredericks Radio Network Monday to Saturday. And I just said on America Voice News, The Dish, and Newsmax, among many, many other radio stations. Steve, great to have you with us, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, John, on the kickoff the day after Labor Day, traditional kickoff for the run-up to presidential elections.
8 weeks to go, Steve. I heard your show, I think it was on Friday, and I was fascinated with it, where you were breaking down what you might want to call the Transition Integrity Project, or the effort by Democrats to steal this election by not naming a winner. You're really out front in this. You know, when this stuff first bubbled up, it looked like conspiracy type stuff. But the way you guys broke it down, this thing is real. I was hoping that you would share with our audience, Steve, the entire scenario that some Democrats are planning.
It's not some of Democrats. It's basically all the apparatus that opposes President Trump. I mean, this is a more sophisticated version of the nullification project, which was around to delegitimize him in 2016 from the very moment we won. So this couldn't be any more serious. It's not, look, people that listen to me on TV, that see my news hits, that have seen my speeches, that watch War and Pandemic or War and Impeachment. I don't believe in conspiracy theories, but I also don't believe in coincidences. This thing has been out there. This is ties together why Hillary Clinton said under no circumstances should Joe Biden concede. This talks about all the, all their efforts to try to delegitimize President Trump right now. So this is an effort where they're petrified because I think they overplayed their hand somewhat on this pandemic, that they're not going to get people to the polls on voting day, on November 3rd. And they're absolutely completely freaked out that President Trump on Election Day is going to have a potential landslide victory by midnight that night. And they're going to make every effort in this recount to try to decertify votes, etc., to make sure that they win in the count of the mail-in votes. And they've actually laid it out. This is not something they're hiding. This Transition Integrity Project, and remember, look at the word transition. They already assume that Biden's going to win. They've laid out 4 scenarios. It's up on our website. You can get a national pulse. You can get it over Revolver, the new kind of anti-drudge site, which is doing an excellent job of breaking this down. But they've put out a 22-page report. Everybody in your audience should read that report, and particularly read Raheem Kassam's annotated version of it. But they talk about the lawfare aspect of this. They talk about the media and information warfare part of it. They talk about the street violence. They actually say that the deciding factor will be street fighting. I mean, this is in the document, and this is by prominent Democrats, election officials, former cabinet officers. John Podesta, John Podesta ran it. It had prominent Republicans on it, Bill Kristol and Michael Steele, part of the Never Trump crowd. And this was a very thorough, and they had 4 scenarios. One that Biden wins in a landslide, so on Election Day, so he wins. They had one Biden close on Election Day. They had ambiguous like 2000. Then they had Trump wins barely on Election Day. In all those scenarios, in 20 days, Biden wins. Then they came out with Hawkfish. Now, Hawkfish is one of the most sophisticated data mining operations around there. It's owned by Michael Bloomberg. Obviously, Bloomberg is one of the most sophisticated, financial and capital markets information services companies around. Hawkfish does this for politics. Hawkfish ran their own set of metrics, came on the Axios HBO show, I think 2 Sundays ago, and laid out a 5th scenario. This 5th scenario is where at 11 o'clock at night on November 3rd, Donald J. Trump is up with 424 electoral votes. He's leading in those states. And by Thanksgiving, Joe Biden has won as president. So we're pulling literally now dozens and dozens of articles from around the country about voter certification, counting the vote, etc., putting up on the site with the show today. Everything we're doing from here on in is really about get out the vote and about this process of which they intend to really have a coup and keep President Trump from taking the oath of office for a second term. This is absolutely serious. Look, this is one of the reasons, not the primary reason, I didn't join the campaign. I wanted to. This is something you can't do at the campaign. The campaign's got its own things with lawyers, etc. But we're organizing, every day, 24/7, and have been for weeks. This effort to make sure that there's no chance that the election's stolen from President Trump, and the left can't sit there. Media Matters and Mediaite and these crowd can't sit there and go, oh, this is wingnut stuff. It's all been published in Nation magazine, in the Washington Post, in this transition integrity project, and they put it out there to start to socialize this. So I think conservative media is starting to pick up on it. We were all over it last week. The Revolver site, if people haven't gone there, it's like the Virginia Star. You get these great new emerging, websites with news and information. Your audience should go there, but we're going to be all over today, 7 days a week. In fact, we may actually take the show 7 days a week here in the next couple of weeks because this is important. The first thing people should do is that you need to volunteer. This is no longer a theoretical exercise. The one thing you have to do, I think it's it's called Defend Your Ballot. And if you click on there, it goes to the Army of Trump. I think it goes to the campaign or some group that's organizing volunteers. Now, here's what you need to do. You need to volunteer to get out the vote now. That means phone banks, knocking on doors. With the CCP virus out there, a lot of this is going to be done digitally. So you need to be engaged now in helping get out the vote.
On the John Fredericks Radio Network, Trucking the Truth Across America with Stephen K. Bannon. He's the host of War Room Pandemic, War Room 2020, 10 to noon, John Fredericks Radio Network, 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday. He comes on after me on all of our networks, also on the Dish Channel 219, America's Voice News, Newsmax, 11 p.m. Steve, you got these 5 scenarios laid out, and this is one thing we both always agree on. Neither of us ever do or get involved in conspiracy theories or politics.
Yeah.
We've never done that. This is why I'm taking this seriously now, because this stuff's real. I'm going to go through the top 5 scenarios. Tell me what happens. Okay, scenario 1, Biden wins in a landslide.
Biden's president. That's Biden wins in a landslide on election day. He's president. He's very tough, I think, on the recount. That's their scenario is Biden wins. If he wins election day in a landslide, the mail-in vote will principally be Democratic, so he'll win. So that's their easiest check.
Election night, Biden close. What happens?
What happens is they go in and start fighting on the in trying to decertify every ballot out there that they think comes from a Republican district, et cetera. It's going to be like the 2000 campaign, the 2000 recount to the 10th power. So it'll be crazy.
Define ambiguous. When they say scenario 3 is ambiguous, it's
ambiguous
midnight, election night.
Ambiguous is 2000. Like we have some districts or some counties. It's very ambiguous. It's an ambiguous situation that's too close to call for either party, too close to call for Biden, too close to call for Trump. And in that regard, and on the counting of the mail-in vote, they win.
Okay, because when you say mail-in ballots, these are typically, except for the states that are doing the universal mail-out, like New Jersey, California, I think a couple others. None of the swing states do that. So these are just traditional absentee ballots, right?
Well, it's traditional, but except in the fact that they're saying that up to 40% of the people could vote by mail-in ballot now. Yeah, that's a huge difference. You get under 5%. Up to 40%. That shows you, and we don't have the apparatus set up to actually do this in a systematic pattern. Remember, last week, I think it was on Friday, they start talking not election day, election week. Mm-hmm. They're even saying that this thing won't even be called, even in any scenario within a week. That means there's going to be all kind of inside these rooms for the counts. You're going to have people in there certifying those ballots. You're going to need strong Republicans. You're going to need people that are fighters. Right, and we traditionally haven't had those types of volunteers. That's why you have to sign up, not just to get the vote now, also a poll watcher. More importantly, this is one of the things we're pushing because all the election lawyers are telling us this. You have to sign up to be an election official in your district today. You've got to go to the voting, your board of supervisors for voting, and you've got to sign up. You can go online. Sometimes they're even paid. I think a lot of it's volunteer, but it's not just to be a poll watcher. It's to actually be in the room and be an election official. So, and every citizen can do that, and that's what we need people to sign up for now. This is going to be a volunteer effort. We need like 50,000 to 100,000 people to do this. On Friday, it was announced that some corporate coalition, like Coalition for Corporations, another progressive left organization, that said that they're going to deliver 350,000 of their employees on a volunteer basis. Well, I would guarantee you that it'll break 80-20 between progressives and conservatives. So this is for your audience. This is Deplorables 101. This is going to be a voluntary. Look, you're going to have lawyers. You're going to have media surrogates. All of that. Look, in this report, and the people have to go to the report. One of the guys, I think his name's Niles Gilman, gives an interview with a NPR and then a Boston radio station. He says that the two most important people in this process will be Zuckerberg and will be Rupert Murdoch. And he basically says if Fox decides that, if Murdoch's convinced not to defend Trump and not to defend Trump during the recount, it just flips the switch. They think it's game over. Same with Zuckerberg and Facebook. Now, let's go back to what Zuckerberg did last week when this thing started to bubble up. Facebook announced that 10 days before the election, they're going to stop political ads. Well, that's to give them legal cover, because then they said, Zuckerberg came out and said that they're not going to announce, they're not going to support any announcing of a winner on election night. This is what Zuckerberg said last week. Now, he's just out. If you go to the Revolver, he was on Axios, I think, last night, and he was saying, I think, some very disturbing things about preparing the American people, right, for a legitimate vote. But Revolver has it up. We're going to actually lead with it on the show today. It'll be in the first couple of segments, and have Raheem Kassam and others. We're going to have an election lawyer from Florida, Ed Pasquale, who's one of the toughest guys out there. He's going to come on the show today and walk through details. So every day on our show for 2 hours, obviously we're going to continue to do top pandemic coverage and top CCP coverage, but we're going to really have the framework is going to be what is a in-your-face coup to make sure that Donald Trump doesn't take the oath of office of president after he legitimately wins an election. And we have to combat this. We have to fight this now. This is going to be a test of the deplorables. And so I can't tell people enough about how, and look, I pride ourselves, and we're the first ones to take this seriously. About 6 or 8 weeks ago, we started having Bill McGinley from the old impeachment show. He's a senior partner over at Holtzman Vogel and a top election guy. And he was saying, hey, the Democrats are already prepped these lawsuits. They have an army of 800 lawyers. This is a Soros-backed operation. They have all these Secretary of States. They have all these local prosecutors. These guys are ready to go, and we're a little bit asleep. Now, we've caught up a lot since then. But he was the first one. He and Raheem were the first ones to talk about this report from the Transition Integrity Project.
Well, now we understand why Soros was investing hundreds of millions of dollars in electing prosecutors in various areas. Nobody could really figure that out. Like, well, why is he doing this? Well, now we understand it. We also understand why he invested heavily in Secretary of State races, because the Secretary of State in these swing states, they have to certify the election. If they don't certify it, there's no winner. Or if they certify, and there's no way to tell. I mean, get to scenario number 5, which I think is the scariest one for our listeners, which is probably likely now to happen, which is Trump wins on election night in a landslide. We're sitting there at 11 o'clock on November 3rd, and Stephen K. Bannon with us. Trump is winning every one of these states. He's ahead in North Carolina. He's ahead in Florida, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. Arizona comes in. He's ahead there, right? It looks like he's going to win in a landslide.
He's ahead in more states than that. He's ahead of states that he's not even to win now. To get
Minnesota, New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Right?
This is, and the reason, and their theory is because that means more people voted by mail and less by, the Trump people turned on election day, but their vote turned out by mail. And if you go through their scenarios between decertification and others, they basically say by Thanksgiving or early December that Biden has won Biden. And look, we've had the clip up from HBO. You just ought to go to Hawkfish, see it from their own lips. Don't take it from Steve Bannon. Let's go back and watch it and embrace it. Read the report. Watch what Hawkfish is saying in this regard, because more of their people voted by mail. They're going to count them all, right? And legitimate or illegitimate, they're going to count these votes. And it's going to, and they say even in that scenario, 4 to 6 weeks later, Biden wins the presidency. So this is going to have a massive media component to it. It's going to have, they actually say in there about the street component. Right now, they're violent. If you look at these articles on progressive sites, they're calling for people. Now, this is not about the siege of Washington. It's supposed to start with Antifa on the 17th, but it's going to be, I think, a adjunct to that. There's certainly going to be a street part of this in Washington, D.C., and probably other cities. So people got to be girded. Gird your loins. This is going to be real, and they're not hiding it. And these are it's in the Washington Post. It's in the New York Times. It's on NPR. It's in interviews given.
So how do the street mobs, how do the street riots, which we're seeing? I mean, the scene in Rochester, New York, was frightening to a lot of people on Friday. They're used as intimidation. Why? I don't need to tell anybody in Richmond, Virginia, and Washington D.C. during the height of the Antifa BLM, demonstrations / protests / riots, the city emptied out. You didn't see a lot of conservatives taking to the street and standing up to that. No. They know it's intimidation. Look what happened in Richmond hasn't even been reported. What happened in Richmond, Virginia hasn't even been reported by the major news organizations. The major news organizations in Richmond. If you didn't have the Virginia Star, you wouldn't hear about it. The Richmond Times-Dispatch hasn't covered it, the real story. The local TV stations haven't covered it. These are all big corporate enterprise, either owned by Warren Buffett and or others, but, quote unquote, legitimate people. These are not marginal sites. You haven't heard the full reporting. This is what you're going to have. It's a fear tactic. And look, Steve Bannon didn't write this. Raheem Kassam didn't write this, right? The guys at Revolver didn't write this. This all came from, this was their project, and it's been done for, a professor at Georgetown was the one that had the idea, a law professor, a progressive law professor, and she's the one that's that pulled this thing together, but it's taken on a life of its own, and it's got many elements on the left. Look, they have no intention of Donald J. Trump having a second term. They're prepared to contest the actual legitimacy of this election. And that's why, to me, it's incumbent. The folks, obviously the campaign in the White House is very focused on getting out the vote and doing, what they have to do to make sure President Trump gets every voter to the polls. Every voter gets every one of their. Trump. But we have these states.
It's other people have to put their shoulder to the wheel to defend us, right?
So when Trump wins these states on election night, AP doesn't call it. Nobody calls it. Everybody's afraid because they've been intimidated into not calling it. They say, well, there's all these ballots haven't been counted. But a lot of the ballots that are coming in now are going to be counted. So it's not going to be like 40%.
I don't think that's actually accurate. I think you go look at the states. I think it's, and I'm talking off the top of my head, I think it's 75-25. Don't start counting until the night of, after all the other ballots are counted.
Well, then there'll be the argument about, like, where did the ballots come from? Did they come on time? Did some have to be posted? It's all over the board.
This is exactly what's going to happen. Absolutely, that's the point.
So it's chaos.
Did he get stamped by midnight? Oh, look at what's happened up in I think it's New York 23rd in just a primary, in just one congressional district in a primary, not even a general election, with one party. Look at the difficulty there. I think out in Nevada they had a big problem also in their primary. These already have massive problems to them already. You just talked about a couple of the problems, but there's many more besides that. So this is, and look, here's the thing, they're planning for it. So we have to plan for it too. The thing you have to do in the radio audience is volunteer. You have to be engaged in this election. One, you have to own your vote, which Bill McGinley talked about 2 months ago on our show. You have to own your vote. That means either election day, you have to go and make sure you vote and make sure it's counted. Make sure you see it, the whole process in front of your eyes. Or if you do mail-in, you have to do it early enough, and you have to have the right postage and all that to make sure it gets done. So you have to own your vote. From their end, whether it's get out the vote, whether it's poll watching, or most importantly, whether it's being an election official, where you're actually in the room looking at the postmark, looking at the mail, looking at is the ballot been accurately filled out. That's what people are going to need. They're going to need election officials. It's a duty and right of every citizen to do that with some qualifications. So people ought to go to these sites. We're going to be pushing this information out, 6 days a week on the show and maybe 7 days a week as we get closer. But this is something of urgency. And people
right.
can go to National Pulse, Revolver. All the sites now are starting to have detailed and smart analysis about this.
Steve, you gave us 5 scenarios where Trump doesn't win a second term, from Biden wins in a landslide to Trump wins in a landslide. Give me the scenario where Trump is reelected and he wins.
Where you have, we have, I think President Trump either barely wins or really wins in a landslide. Either the 2 scenarios, and we get an accurate count of the mail-in vote. That is not a phony count. That's actually a real count. I think with a real count, Donald Trump will win. But that's what we need: Trump people. We need Republicans to come together. We need, all the deplorables to come together. You got to get in the room. Not in the room, not in the deal, right? So we have to be in the room, and that means volunteers. And that means people have to get geared up. It's going to look, this election may not be called for a while. People have to get to, you have to get to your websites. You have to know where your news sites are. You have to be pushing out the material. You have to be on social media. This is going to the barricades because they're very upfront about what they're doing, and they're going to run hard and fast. We have to run hard and fast if we're going to counter this. So it's not, to me, it's not an option. This is something that has to be done. And every day on the show, we'll be giving tutorials with some of the best people in the country. We've got Ez Pasquale from Florida, an election lawyer who was there in 2000, who's a Trump major part of the Trump machine in 2016, will be on the show today. And we'll have other experts, Bill McGinley, we'll have experts on every day to walk people through it. But no, part of your show ought to be dedicated to this, and then obviously all of our shows. So it's time now.
I got to do it every day because, look, we were a little late to the party here because, again, I don't do the conspiracy thing. But when I heard you and Raheem the other day and then started reading some of the stuff, and then, we haven't even gotten into what the U.S. government has done in foreign countries with the color revolutions in Eastern Europe, such as Ukraine or Belarus recently, where they removed leaders. And part of the whole strategy was these street riots and street mobs.
Well,
and
it's the street mobs,
what is
but
this?
Also it's also the military part of it. Look, that Atlantic article didn't randomly drop the other day. The right before Labor Day weekend, where they knew it would take up a huge part of the news cycle, that was all also to put doubt into the military's mind. Remember, General Milley, we're living in historic times. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff came out, I think it was 2 weeks ago, responding to a letter sent to him from congressmen about the military actually physically removing President Trump if, quote unquote, he lost the election from the White House. And Milley said he was not going to get involved. The military is not going to get involved. But that was driven by part of this transition integrity project. And look, this is not Steve Bannon. That's Milley actually going out formally and saying that. And you saw the article in The Atlantic, and you've seen the firestorm it's created. That's all that sowed doubt in the military's mind. So this is a very well thought through. The media is going to be a huge part of this. You have to pay attention. This is just like on war and impeachment. When I came on your show, and you're one of the best you're the best radio host out there for the Trump movement because you're attached. You're in the mix with the deplorables. And at that time, that was in October. Remember, you said, "Oh, it's not going to happen. It's all fake news." Well, no, I told you it is going to happen on your show, and it did happen. So this is the exact same thing. This is not some wingnut theory. This is the mainstream media and prominent institutions on the left have laid out to already socialize it, this effort, this coordinated effort, and they're hitting it every day. And it's incumbent upon us, if we're going to stop it, like we stopped President Trump from being, he got impeached, but he didn't get removed from office. You can do this by organizing. We have to organize. We have to mobilize, just like the left's doing. And we have time to do it if people get focused now. And so that's why at 10 o'clock, we'll be doing more of this today, and we'll do it every day and around the clock.
Stephen K. Bannon, I'm out of time. I want to thank you for that. Thank you for what you're doing.
Let's face it, the media, your liberal friends on Facebook, and those rioting in the streets want you to stay home on Election Day. They think your voice and even your thoughts are politically incorrect and unacceptable. Prove them wrong and go to 10for20.com now and commit to voting this November 3rd.